Hey guys, it is Mar here with Inside 8, and happy Friday to all of you out there here in Chicago. It went from swimsuit weather yesterday to a little bit of freezing temps overnight, but trying to channel my inner warm weather summer vibes going on here. So, hope you all are having a wonderful day. I'm here to just talk to you kind of openly today about a couple of things. On our blog, we've had some really interesting articles pop up. Julie D had wrote something called Coloring Outside the Lines, and I wanted to kind of bring up a couple of points there as it relates to kind of the own rules that we have for ourselves and how we go about those rules and implement them into our daily life. So just kind of going all over the place today. So if you haven't had a chance to read her article, it's a really wonderful piece of work. She always speaks in a very kind of storytelling-like element, and she tells her story about how she loves rules. And I do too, actually. So when I was reading it, I was kind of nodding along with Julie, thinking, I like rules too. But rules can tend to feel a little bit rigid when they're coming from an external source. So how can we move away from feeling like we have rules that are put upon us that we may not ultimately be wanting to follow, and switching them up to rules that we want to follow? So she was talking, she's an entrepreneur, and as am I, and with a lack of structure in terms of a job, when you have to make your own structure, that's where making your own rules can become very important. But for a lot of us, we have rules put upon us. So we have jobs, we have times that we need to be in the office, we have deadlines, and we have other obligations. So rules based on those obligations of being somewhere at a certain time, getting something finished by a certain time, and so forth. So how can we make rules work for us? So I like to think of it as just being a little bit selfish and making your own rules. So when you start to switch the mindset, making a daunting task or a daunting deadline feel that you have to, so you have to have this done by a certain time, that rule that you feel is put upon yourself, then all of a sudden becomes kind of very heavy, and you feel rushed, and you may feel a little bit panicky. And when you're told to do something, sometimes like a child, you don't want to when you're being told what to do. So how can we move away from that? One of the things that we can do is by shifting the perspective. So when we are told certain things, how can that deadline now work for us? We all have to follow certain rules, but when it comes to making your own, when you think about, okay, this deadline is something that it's put upon me by an external source, but I now want to do the best work that I can do. So how can I switch the rule from I have to have this done at this certain date to how can I find my best piece of work in this task? So how can I do the best job that I can? So making your own rules to set into place that action to take to make that task feel that you are doing your best work. So for example, if you're writing a blog post or you're writing a piece of work for your place of work, or even just journaling, a lot of times, or actually I have a better example. My fiance, he works for a financial services company, and they write call reports. So basically that is writing about the meetings that you've had. And it always feels very daunting for him. So he never wants to write this. And I wouldn't either. So being forced to throw onto paper everything that had gone on in that meeting and then having to put it into a certain way of wording it to make it readable by the rest of your team, how can you make it more exciting, and how can you make that task less about the finished deadline that is due versus moving it into, I want to write down everything that my potential client spoke about so that I can do the best job that I can with that client and for that client. So it's kind of switching the way you view certain elements of your job or tasks or what you have to do. So rather than having to, it's I get to. And that leads me to my favorite tool, which is the to-do list. I like to talk about it as an I get to list. So not only do you get to do these things, but turns an excitement factor on about it versus looking at a to-do list that is very long, lengthy. It seems daunting. So you look at your to-do list and it's like, yeah, it's a lot on that to-do list. And then you look at an I get to list and it kind of changes the perspective. And I have my I get to list here, and I have on here all sorts of different things. I have invoicing, I have invitations that need to be sent out, I have 3 client plans to get to, and I have a couple of other errands that I need to run, but I get to do those things. And when I write them down in that way, I'm changing I'm changing the rules to work for me, not against me. So I love talking about changing the rules. So how can you make your own rules for your daily routines versus I have to go work out because I want to lose weight or I feel that I should be? How about I get to work out? I have the energy. I have little motivation here that I know I can maybe use a little bit more, but I have the ability to get out there and move my body, so I'm going to. It changes the way it sounds, and it changes the way it ultimately feels, and it ends up putting you into action versus setting you back and making you feel heavier and feel like you're weighted down with things that you should be doing. So that's a fun thing to talk about with the rules, making your own. And another thing I wanted to switch gears about, which I had been studying this week, is along with rules, when we put our own rules into place, we then again are setting that action that will make us take the action to take necessary steps to be successful. And there's a quote that says success is consistency, not brilliance, and I agree. So consistency, and I'm not sure who wrote that, so you can Google that and let's credit that person. But when you're consistent in your actionary steps, so those rules that you set into place for you, and now that I'm saying this out loud, I feel like there should be a better word than rules. Maybe I'll think about that. But putting those rules into place for yourself to set yourself up for those little micro goals, for those bigger macro goals, things you can ultimately hit. And eventually, with that consistent rule making and action taking, you will ultimately get closer to the goals that you are hoping to move closer to or complete. So how can you make rules work for you? As I would highly recommend, I was very inspired by Julie's piece. So Inside8.com on the blog, read her story. She references a really cool TV show where I actually don't watch it, but I've seen it before, but it's the episode of Girls. And they're talking about how at the end of the episode, they were sitting down and they were saying, you know what? I just love rules. And I kind of feel the same. And it's kind of a funny thing to say. So even just that in its own element of saying I love rules, it changes the whole stigma around a rule to begin with. So it doesn't feel so heavy. It actually feels like an opportunity. So try it on. Visit us all week long and all month long. As often as you can, we always have a lot of new content for you. This past week, we've been talking about exercises based on your personality type. As you know, if you like a certain exercise, your friend may absolutely dread it. There's not one size fits all exercise for you. So get your health into gear. It's almost summertime. Have a lovely rest of your week and have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. Thanks, guys.